They didn't bury it to preserve it. They buried it to contain it. And the moment someone opened that sarcophagus, an 8-year-old girl became a prisoner. Lee Cronin took everything we thought we knew about mummy horror, the dusty curses, the crumbling bandages, the Boris Karloff shuffle, and replaced it with something far more devastating. A family that couldn't let go, a demon that destroys from the inside out, and a father who had to choose between saving his daughter and becoming the monster himself. This isn't your grandfather's mummy movie. This is grief wrapped in bandages. This is Evil Dead in a New Mexico hacienda. And this is the full story. Every grim detail, nothing held back. Alright, let's go through the full story of Lee Cronin's The Mummy, beginning to end with all the nasty little details intact. This is a complete plot breakdown. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, and somehow clicked onto this section, this is your last chance to bail. Okay, stop. Hieroglyphics on the wall. People, this is your official warning. What you're about to hear is the complete, unfiltered, beginning to end breakdown of Lee Cronin's The Mummy. Every twist, every death, every disgusting detail, and yes, that epilogue. So if you haven't seen the film yet, and you want to go in fresh, the exit is to your left. Go watch it. Come back when you're ready to process what just happened to you. For everyone still here, the lid is officially off the sarcophagus. Let's go. Welcome back to A Constantly Racing Mind, the channel where pop culture meets philosophy, and we cover the genres of sci-fi, horror, action-adventure, prop culture, and all things geek. Hi, I'm Rob, and this is the kind of channel where we don't just ask what happened. We ask what it means, why it does hit the way it does, what is the movie actually saying beneath all the body, horror, and vomit and the grandmother flying through a window. Lee Cronin's The Mummy is not subtle. It's loud, it's nasty, it's relentless. But underneath all of that, there's a story about guilt, about what we carry, about the impossible weight of protecting your family from something you cannot name. So, if that sounds like your kind of conversation, smash the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a breakdown. And if you've already seen the film and you're still trying to untangle that ending, you are exactly in the right place. Before we unseal this thing, 2 quick asks. 1. If you find this breakdown useful, hit like. It tells the algorithm this kind of content is worth surfacing, and it helps the channel keep the lights on. 2. Drop a comment below. Tell me, did you see the Charlie sacrifice coming? Because I had a theory about halfway through, and I want to know if you did too. The comment section is open, and I actually do read them. Alright, 8 years in a sarcophagus, one family holding the curse together, and one detective with a hole in her throat finishing an ancient ritual. Let's start at the beginning, with a completely different family, a canary that doesn't make it, and a shed that is definitely not just a shed. The movie doesn't start with the cannons. It opens on a completely different family somewhere in Egypt. Mom, dad, 3 kids in the back seat, driving home in the afternoon, singing along to Arabic pop. The father is hyping the kids up, leading them in singing and dancing. The mother, played by Hawa Camille, is driving and looks done with them all. She actually shuts the music off and snaps that they all are annoying her. We get one quick little character moment where Dad teases the youngest girl, Layla, about her singing voice. It's bright, energetic, normal family opening, designed to lull us before the movie starts being cruel. This is important as we will have to mentally revisit this moment later in the film. So when they get home, the mood shifts. Layla's canary is laying in the cage, bleeding to death. We don't see what did it. Layla begs her mother to help the bird. Instead, the mother crushes it. She tells all 3 kids to stay upstairs. She and her husband head out to what looks like a large shed in the yard. Inside, we find out that this shed is actually the cap of a buried ritual chamber, the top of a small pyramid studded with strange markings. They go down into the chamber beneath. In the middle sits a huge basalt sarcophagus, like something that absolutely does not belong under anybody's house. We get our title here, Lee Cronin's The Mummy, written in bandages like strips covered in ancient script, and then we come back to this couple. The father operates a winch to lift the stone lid. They both carry Aladdin-style oil lamps, so the whole thing feels like an old-world religious ceremony, not a horror gag. As he cranks the lid up, he keeps asking, "Is he alive?" The woman leans in, checks, and finally says, "No, he is not." And of course, because this is a horror movie, that's when the mummy sits up and yells at the woman, scaring the crap out of her. The hook that holds the lid shifts as the man, too, drops his hold of the winch, and the hook catches him on the jaw, lifting him up into the air as he bleeds out. The lid falls and the mummy starts knocking on the inside of the sarcophagus. We first see Charlie tapping out Morse code on the table, helping Katie practice for her Egyptian school's Girl Scouting badge. It's a little father-daughter bonding moment that's gonna matter later. We are now introduced to this family, the Cannons. Charlie Cannon is a TV reporter living in Cairo. His wife Laurie is a nurse. They got 2 kids already. Their oldest is 9, Katie, and Sebastian is about 2 years behind her. The conversation shifts to pizza. Sebastian wants some, is messing around, and on TV in the background we see Charlie reporting on flooding around the Aswan Dam. Seb is in full mock my dad mode, mimicking Charlie's hand gestures. Charlie finds Laurie in the bathroom, putting on makeup. They have a silly little conversation about Charlie's hand tics. The point of all this small talk is simple. Cronin is making sure we see that this is a functioning, affectionate family, not just cannon fodder. We get to know them just enough before he starts tearing them apart. Did I want more of this type of dynamic? Sure I did. But others, like my wife, they just want to get to the horror. The first crack comes with a very simple sibling fight. Sebastian has thrown Katie's doll off the roof to test out a parachute. Katie has him pinned, screaming at him when the parents rush in. Sebastian, or Seb, admits what he did right away. The parents handled it calmly. Katie is enraged that they didn't properly yell at him. She stomps off, saying she needs time alone, and goes out to the garden for a pretend picnic. That's where she meets the magician. At the back fence, a hooded woman appears, the same woman we saw in the prologue. She tells Katie that she is Layla's mother, or as the Americans say it, Mom, and that Layla is sick and won't be there today, but that she is a magician. We learn she has already been grooming Katie through Layla with candy. What kid doesn't love candy? Katie has a stash for wrappers hidden away. Sebastian casually mentions that some kid gives her candy at the fence. Inside, Charlie gets a phone call with good news. He landed a better job in New York. He calls Larissa at work to celebrate. While outside, the magician decides today is the day. After the candy, she offers Katie a nectarine. Before Katie can bite into it, a scarab beetle crawls out, scuttles up her arm, and goes straight into her mouth. Katie goes into what I can only describe as an anaphylactic-style shock. The magician lifts her and carries her away through a hole in the fence. Charlie comes out, sees the candy wrappers, realizes something is wrong, and then from a distance sees the woman carrying his daughter down a narrow street. He runs after her, but at that point, a sandstorm hits Cairo. Sirens go off, people dive for cover, and he loses sight of them in the chaos. Living in Arizona, we get these haboob sandstorms, and from a distance, they look awesome. The family goes to the police. At the Zamalek station, the Cannons are questioned by a senior detective while a younger officer, Dalia Zaki, translates and observes. The lead detective does the usual, maybe the parents did it, routine. Zaki is not convinced. Larissa shows Zaki the stash of candy wrappers from the fence. Zaki picks up on the grooming pattern, but she still can't find Katie. The girl is gone. 8 years later, Albuquerque, New Mexico. We jump 8 years forward. The Cannons now live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in Larissa's mother's big old hacienda-style house. Stucco, wood beams, 1940s, 50s bones. Charlie works as a producer at a local television station. Larissa still hasn't moved on emotionally. We see her standing in what is basically a shrine to Katie in her old bedroom, kept exactly as it was the day she vanished. Nothing has been touched. We meet Maud, the daughter who was in Larissa's womb when Katie disappeared. She's about 8, played by Billy Roy, and she matters as much as anyone else in this story. Carmen, Abuela, is the matriarch here. She's devoutly Catholic, loud, funny, and absolutely not safe in this movie. Have you ever lived with your mother-in-law? I have. At dinner, Carmen leads Grace. Prayers and religious language run all throughout the film, and Cronin makes a point of showing that none of this is going to stop what's coming. Sebastian is now a teenager. He asks about going on a school trip to Europe. Larissa shuts it down immediately. No discussion. The kid knows why. He's grown up in the shadow of a missing sister and in a house where losing a kid once is the worst thing anyone can imagine. The important thing here, this is a family that stayed together after the loss. They built a life around that absence, not instead of it. Back in Egypt, we see a small plane fall from the sky. It crashes in a desert oasis. A local witnesses it, finds the wreckage and 2 dead brothers, and also discovers an upright basalt sarcophagus, half buried in the ground. Later, in a university or lab setting, an older man and a woman examine the coffin. They comment on how intact it is, given the crash. They lift the lid and begin cutting away bandages. Underneath is a teenage girl's face. It's Katie. A beetle crawls out of her mouth. Back in New Mexico, the family is driving up to a little pizza stand in the middle of nowhere, actually enjoying a normal evening. The phone rings, someone from the embassy calls. They found Katie, and she is alive. Charlie and Larissa fly to Cairo. A doctor meets them and tries to prepare them. Katie's vitals are strong. Her pulse never climbs above 85, but she is in a semi-catatonic state. He warns them she does not look or sound like the girl they remember. Oh yeah. He also mentions
no sudden moves.
Hey, what else can you tell a parrot about their child to instill calm in them? Cronin doesn't give us a full monster reveal right away. We see fragments, her profile out of focus, her lower half of her face, hints of a leathery texture on her skin. The doctor's recommendation is basically take her home, give her time, get her help. They insist on taking her home. They take the suggestion way too literally. This girl needs not only physical help, but psychological help. But I get it. This is their daughter, and they know. They, as parents, screwed up. Now is their chance for redemption. After that first shocking glimpse of Katie in the hospital bed, Charlie and Larissa are brought into a side room to meet Dalia Zaki. 8 years ago, she was a junior officer translating for them. Now she's Detective Zaki. They sit down and immediately the old wounds open and back up. Zaki explains that at the time, the department's working theory was that Charlie had done something to his daughter. Charlie bristles. He asks if she was the one of the people who believed that. Zaki is careful. She tells him that was her late boss's opinion, not hers. But you can see the accusation still hangs in the air. Charlie can't help lashing out. He mocks her, asking if she's going to do a better job this time to actually finding out who took his daughter. She doesn't rise to it. She just absorbs the anger and shifts to the facts. Zaki lays out what they know. Katie was found sealed inside a 3,000-year-old sarcophagus in the wreckage of a smuggling flight. Charlie snaps. Why the hell was his daughter in a 3,000-year-old coffin? Zaki explains that in her country, antiquities are one of the ways human beings are trafficked. If you want to move bodies or people without questions, you hide them in the same crates and shipments as the artifacts everyone's too scared to open. It doesn't answer everything, but it frames Katie's disappearance in a way that's even more horrifying. She wasn't just taken, she was turned into cargo. Back in Albuquerque, Carmen, Sebastian, and Maud are waiting outside the house when the car pulls up with Katie. This part is kind of ridiculous. They wheel her out in a chair. She looks fragile, brittle, like she might shatter. However, instead of setting up a room downstairs, they decide to put her in her old bedroom upstairs. That means they drag the wheelchair backwards up this old wooden staircase. Every step, the chair slams into the stairs and rattles the girls inside. On a second viewing, it almost plays as dark comedy. If you truly thought this child's bones were about to snap, you would not do that. They settle her in her preserved childhood bedroom. Now we finally see her. Katie looks like a living mummy. Skin thick and leathery, face distorted, eyes sunken, breath a constant wheeze. She's not the skeletal Emily Rose type of a possessed kid. She looks preserved rather than decayed. Carmen wastes no time. She's immediately praying over Katie, rosary in hand, asking for healing. Larissa tries to get Sebastian to say hi to his sister. Katie stares vacantly. Maud says hi to her sister and rambles on about Taylor Swift, who I guess Katie had a thing for. As Carmen finishes an intense prayer and says, "Amen," Katie snaps. She suddenly headbutts Carmen with terrifying force, breaking her nose, splitting her lip, throwing her backwards. Then she contorts and attacks her again. Charlie and Larissa pile on their daughter and dose her with a sedative. Now, this is our first real taste of how cruel this movie is going to be to Grandma, Abuela. And it's just getting started. That night, Katie wanders the house with a flashlight. She ends up in her room, with Sebastian's room too. They have a bunk bed and she sleeps on top. Scared by the sound of wolves or coyotes howling outside, Seb reassures her that they can't get in. Then the knocking starts on the walls. This old house has access panels built into the walls for access to the plumbing and electrical behind it. When Charlie and Larissa realize Katie isn't in her bed, they open one and crawl in. Inside the walls, Katie is crawling in a feral, animalistic way. Pure nightmare fuel. She finds a scorpion and eats it like a snack. It's one of the film's most straightforwardly mummy-adjacent gross-outs. Desert creature, kid host, swallowed. Sebastian and Maud approach Katie's room. Through the door frame, we see Katie scuttle past, then Charlie, then Larissa. They tackle Katie. She vomits massively. There's a lot of vomiting in this movie. The Sam Raimi influence is not subtle. Later that night, Maud wakes up because she has to pee. She shuffles out of the hallway doing that little hold-it-in dance, glances nervously at Katie's closed door, then sprints to the bathroom. On her way back to bed, she freezes. From behind Katie's door, she hears someone softly singing, "You are my sunshine." Not the dry rasp that we've been hearing, but the clear little girl voice of a child. Katie calls her closer, tells her she's her favorite family member. Maud points out that they barely even know each other. Katie smiles through the door and says that's exactly why she likes her, and that she wants to taste her piggies. Maud hesitates, but she's still a kid. She edges up to the door, barefoot, and that's when a tongue slides out from under the gap on the bottom of the frame. Katie licks Maud's toes from under the door. One slow, deliberate pass over her little piggies. Maud jerks back, horrified, and tries to run. But the look on her face tells you everything. Whatever Katie is carrying has just crossed the threshold. From this point on, it's pretty clear Katie isn't just haunting the house. She's inside Maud, staring her, and that quiet, gross little moment under the door is where the infection really starts. The next day, Charlie is installing new locks on those wall access doors when he notices a smell. He pulls back the rug near where Katie threw up and finds the floorboards infected with a foul, biological-looking growth spreading outwards. It's gross. In the bathroom, Carmen and Larissa attempt to groom Katie, brushing her hair, trimming her nails. Now, this leads into one of the most talked about scenes, the toenail. Katie's big toenail looks like a bear talon. Larissa, who is a nurse and should know better, tries to clip it with large clippers, but I would suggest wire cutters. One of the first clippings flies and ends up in Katie's mouth. Gross, but believable. Some people actually do need eye protection for this hygiene habit. The next attempt rips away an entire strip of skin from her leg. It's not just a flap, it's a panel of skin. Katie freaks out. Off screen we hear the carnage as Katie escapes the two women and her wheelchair. Katie starts stabbing herself. The scene is squeamish in a very Evil Dead Rise way. Cutting, peeling, self-harm, all wrapped in possession. Charlie rushes in to find both women on the floor, and Carmen has taken damage for a second time. Katie bolts, racing downstairs and trying to saw more skin off her body. Charlie chases her. Larissa manages to tackle her again, and they sedate her. Later in the bathroom, Charlie finds that strip of skin hanging off the wheelchair. In his basement, in the missing Katie command center, he examines it. He discovers it's not skin at all. It's layered bandage strips fused to her flesh, each with ancient script on it. He peels them apart and lays them out. Every strip is covered in hieratic, the cursive form of ancient Egyptian writing. Charlie takes the strips to a local archaeology professor. Yes, it's the classic go see the expert scene, who identifies the script and translates reference to a demon called the Nazarenian, known as the destroyer of families. The professor explains that this family has been binding this demon for over 80 generations, using an elaborate ritual. The host is mummified alive, and the bandage script binds the entity. Katie, we learn later, is the 82nd ritual. Her skin is really a scroll. That's why she keeps trying to tear herself open. The demon inside wants out. In a quiet moment, Charlie sits with Katie in her room, crying over her. Katie starts snapping her teeth together in a strange rhythm. Because of that early Girl Scout bad scene, Charlie recognizes as Morse code. He scribbles the pattern down, runs to the basement, digs up in her old Morse code manual, and starts translating. The name he gets is Layla. He calls Dalia Zaki in Egypt and asks her to look up the name. She points out that there are a lot of Laylas and asks if the family ever knew one personally. This sends Charlie to the creepy cedar trunk in the basement, a huge coffin-sized chest stuffed with unopened letters and cards people sent after Katie disappeared. He digs through every envelope until he finds one from a girl named Layla, Katie's old school friend. On the front of the card is a picture of the candy she used to bring her. Inside, Layla has written an apology. "I'm sorry for what happened to you. You were my friend." She signs it with her full name. That gives Zaki a full name and a return address. Zaki traces Layla Khalil to a nectarine farm oasis near Aswan, a little pocket of green that shouldn't be there. She arrives to find the farmhouse empty and snoops around. Inside is the concealed pyramid chamber and the ritual space where the sarcophagus once sat. She explores the underground room, sees the ritual altar, the place where the host is bound above the coffin, and then goes back up. Layla's mother, the magician, is waiting for her with a large knife. The magician charges. Zaki shoots her, wounding her badly. Holding pressure on the wound, Zaki demands to know what they did to Katie. At that moment, Zaki spots another figure outside who begins running through the nectarine trees. She gives chase and sees a woman digging frantically under a stone at the cliff's edge. Zaki draws on her, orders her to show her hands. The woman raises her hands holding a small tin box. Inside is a VHS tape, labeled with Katie's name. Back at the station, Zaki plays the tape. On it, Layla's mother, the magician, explains the ritual in a calm, matter-of-fact tone. She talks about the Nazarenian, about binding one host to save many, about the scripture on the wrapping, about how the host must be mummified, alive, and entombed to give humanity a chance. Zaki then goes to question Layla and finds out that the girl's tongue has been cut out. Her own mother did it to keep her from ever speaking about what they did to Katie. Through writing, Layla is able to communicate that her brothers, the men who crashed on the plane, were moving the sarcophagus because the valley was about to be flooded by the dam. Katie was supposed to remain sealed and submerged, never disturbed. Zaki now has the tape, the lore, and the motive. She calls Charlie and tells him she needs to see him in person ASAP. Back in New Mexico, the Nazarenian is rapidly building power. Charlie is driving Maud and Sebastian home from school, and we learn that Maud, under Katie's influence, called her teacher a cunt in class. That's our marker that the demon is weaponizing the youngest. Meanwhile, Carmen is back in Katie's room praying hard with her rosary, basically saying Catholic spells over her. The Nazarenian has had enough. Katie attacks Carmen again, this time using telekinesis to whip the rosary around her neck and hang her, tightening the beads until she chokes. This is where the trailer line drops.
Don't worry, Grandma. It's fun to be dead.
Then she throws Carmen out the upstairs window, and as Charlie pulls into the driveway in the Jeep with both kids, Carmen's body crashes down onto the windshield, showering them in glass and blood. Larissa runs upstairs, sees the broken window, then looks down to see Carmen's body dragged off the hood and torn apart by a pack of coyotes that had been circling the property since Katie came home. There is no level of hell Lee Cronin is unwilling to put this character through. The movie then stages one of its most memorable sequences, the wake. Carmen's open casket is set up in the house and her church friends have gathered. They're eating, gossiping, making petty comments about her embalming job and ancient curtain accidents. It's very darkly funny. Maud is there, already riding the demon's wavelength. Charlie is upstairs guarding Katie's double-locked bedroom door, practically frozen. Sebastian comes up to tell him that Larissa wants him downstairs. After a couple of tries, they swap. Seb stands guard at the door. Charlie goes down. Maud is snacking and loses a tooth. She pulls it out, then another, and then another, until the floor around her is littered with baby teeth. It's an unnerving mix of child body horror and deadite behavior. She goes on to look at Carmen's body and sees the stitching that's holding Carmen's mouth closed. She tugs on the suture. That's not going to go well later, trust me. Upstairs, Katie is attacking the rotted floor spot where that grew from her earlier vomit. She pushes through the weakened wood and begins crawling along the underside of the floor, directly above the wake, like a monster on a ceiling. Maud manages to fully open Grandma's mouth and steals her dentures. She turns and grins at her parents. Bloody gums, borrowed teeth. It's nasty. She then bites one of the guests. At that exact moment, Katie drops through the ceiling into the casket. She lands on Carmen's corpse and immediately bites a chunk out of her neck. Embalming fluid pours out. Katie starts licking up the fluid while Maud, wearing Grandma's dentures, goes around biting the priest and the guests. Everyone panics. Charlie and Larissa grab Maud, but the casket keeps shaking. Katie's arm punches out of the coffin. Then the whole casket tips over. Carmen's body spills onto the floor again, humiliated, even in death. They sedate Katie yet again and strap her back into the wheelchair. At this point, the film has fully crossed from grief horror into full tilt Evil Dead territory. The wake is the turning point. The family finally decides they need to leave. Larissa is upstairs packing. Maud is furious, calling her a bad mother for wanting to take them away from Katie. In Katie's room, Charlie sits watching their daughter levitate the wheelchair and slam it into the floor over and over, his eyes empty. At this point, he's so exhausted and traumatized that he's almost catatonic. In another room, Sebastian, completely under Katie's control, is smashing his forehead into the bed frame repeatedly. That's when Zaki arrives. Detective Dalia Zaki has flown overnight from Egypt with a VHS tape. She meets Larissa and Charlie in their living room. They play the tape. On screen, Layla's mother, the magician, explains the purpose of the ritual. There is a demon called the Nazarenian, destroyer of families. For 80-plus generations, her family was bound by it, sacrificing one living host at a time. We see the underground chamber under the pyramid. Masked family members gather, wearing crude flat wooden masks with eye holes. Katie is tied up in a crucifixion pose, sobbing and begging to go back to her parents. The ritual begins. During the chant, she is hoisted up and positioned about a foot above the existing mummy in the sarcophagus so they are face to face. At the height of their incantation, the mummy opens its mouth and vomits a torrent of foul liquid into Katie's mouth. The demon moves from the old host to the new one. Horrified, Charlie and Larissa watch this footage of their child taped and crying, being used as a container. It's brutal to watch them watch it. My heart broke at this point. The ritual continues and Katie being wrapped in strips of inscribed cloth. The binding spells have already been fused to her flesh. At this point, the tape makes the rules explicit. The demon is contained by the scripture on the wrappings. The host must be mummified and sealed. Eventually, the demon has to be transferred to a new host before the old one burns out. While her parents are watching this, Katie is calling Sebastian upstairs to help her get undressed, meaning helping her tear off the last of those binding strips. When the tape ends, Larissa can't take it anymore. She runs upstairs to try to get Kate into Katie's room, fighting with the locks. Charlie stays frozen in front of the TV, shell-shocked. Zaki follows Larissa upstairs. The house goes to war with the Nazarenian, who is now more or less unbound. Without the scripture skin to hold it in, it turns the house into a war zone. Carmen, now undead, appears downstairs making crude sexual comments to Charlie while slurping some disgusting kitchen slop. The movie refuses to stop humiliating her body. Upstairs, Katie bursts out of her room, full demon. She attacks Larissa and Zaki. Charlie gets beaten badly. Katie smashes her forehead into his face repeatedly until he is swollen, bloody, almost unrecognizable. Larissa grabs the sedative, tries to get it to Katie, but Sebastian, still controlled, steps in with the same baseball bat we saw earlier and swings at her. Larissa dives into the wall access space. Sebastian crawls after her, his head a mess, acting like a full deadite. She manages to circle around behind him and sedates him. Meanwhile, Katie throws Zaki down the stairs. At the bottom, Carmen coughs up another horror, a scorpion, which he spits straight into Zaki's mouth. The scorpion forces its way down her throat and then up again, tearing a hole out of her through her neck. Zaki grabs it and pulls it out through her mouth, leaving it a ragged, bleeding opening and shredded vocal cords. Either Zaki or Charlie finally dispatches Carmen for real at this point, and both survivors retreat into Katie's room and slam the door. Charlie and Zachy are both on the floor of Katie's room, wrecked. Katie is on the other side of the door, pounding. Charlie knows what has to happen. He nods to Zachy to open the door. She does, and Katie charges in to finish him. Charlie grabs her and wraps her in a tight embrace, pinning her arms. It's both an act of restraint and an act of love. He's literally hugging his daughter while offering himself up in her place. Zachy has memorized the chant from the tape. The problem is her throat. She starts to recite but can't get the words out, so she does one of the nastiest things in the movie. She pushes her fingers into the open wound in her neck and presses on her own vocal cords from the inside to force the sound out. With that, she rasps the ritual in full. All of this is so insane. Larissa crawls back into the room through the wall access mid-ritual. Charlie looks at her and apologizes for failing their daughter, for the years of blame, and for what he's about to do. The transfer completes. The Nazarenian leaves Katie and enters Charlie. Katie collapses, and when she speaks again, her voice is her own. The scars remain, the demon does not. Charlie, on the other hand, is gone. He's now the container. We jump ahead into an extended epilogue, and I understand wanting to cut the film and forget the epilogue. I had the same issue with No Country for Old Men. The last part with the sheriff lamenting on the future I thought was unnecessary. I'm on the fence with this one, considering that there may be more to the story to explore. Well, only time will tell. Katie has been medically stabilized and visually rejuvenated. New hair, better skin tone, but the film leaves something scarring as a reminder of what she's been through. You can see it in her hands, not the smooth hands of a teenager, but weathered and wrinkled of a senior citizen. In the basement, the same coffin-like trunk we saw earlier has become Charlie's sarcophagus. Chains bind the lid. Inside, he's been wrapped and inscribed, just like the previous host. Katie sits by the box and taps. Charlie taps back from inside, using Morse code, to tell her, "I love you." Upstairs, she's back to being a big sister on the surface, playing with Maud and Sebastian as if they're just a normal family again. But the curse is literally living under their feet. Now we cut to Egypt. It's nighttime. Zachy stands at the window, unable to sleep. She gets a call, likely from Larissa, and we understand these two women are bound together by this curse and this family. Then we cut on a prison hospital cell. On the bed lies the magician, Layla's mother, alive, scarred from the earlier gunshot wound. A nurse enters to inject her. The nurse is Larissa. Behind her, escorted by Zachy, comes a hooded figure in a wheelchair. It's Charlie, now fully possessed and physically transformed. Skin darkened and cracked, eyes sunken. The closest this movie gives us to a classic mummy. Zachy and Larissa lock the cell. We can only assume they transferred the demon out of Charlie. Lee Cronin is an Irish writer-director who first broke through with the 2019 horror feature, The Hole in the Ground. That film premiered at Sundance, and trade coverage at the time framed it as his feature debut. Its premise is very Cronin-like. A mother begins to fear that the boy who came back from the woods may not really be her son. Before that, Cronin had already built a name in horror shorts, especially 2013's Ghost Train. Screen Ireland says he was well known for his short film work before Evil Dead Rise, and specifically notes that Ghost Train won the Médaille d'Argent for Best European Fantastic Short Film. Other festival coverage describes it as a story about estranged brothers returning to an abandoned fairground tied to a childhood disappearance, which fits the same grief and memory territory he keeps returning to. Honestly, I haven't seen the film. That is really the clearest thing to know about Cronin as a filmmaker. He tends to build horror around family rupture, guilt, domestic unease, and something familiar turning wrong. The Hole in the Ground is about material fear and identity. Evil Dead Rise moved the franchise from the cabin to a family trapped in an apartment building. And Cronin said the domestic space became more important while he was writing during lockdown. He also described that film as a punk rock opera dripping in blood. And that same pattern clearly carries into The Mummy. We see that The Mummy is not focused on ancient royalty or adventure spectacle. Instead, it centers on grieving family whose missing daughter returns changed. with Cronin leaning into body horror, possession, mystery, and emotional trauma. So even outside Evil Dead Rise, what we have learned about him is pretty consistent. He is a horror filmmaker drawn to family-centered dread, psychological damage, and visceral physical horror. David Garbett is the cinematographer of The Mummy, and he was also the cinematographer on Evil Dead Rise. He worked on Ash vs. Evil, and he has worked on Sweet Tooth, Z for Zachariah, and Underworld, Rise of the Lycans. That gives him a strong mix of fantasy and stylized horror work. What that means for this film is pretty straightforward. Garbett already knows how to shoot Cronin's version of horror. On Evil Dead Rise, that meant tight interiors, aggressive camera language, and a look that could swing from grounded family drama to full nightmare. And because he also worked on Ash vs. Evil Dead, he has been in the horror lane for a while, not just on one film. Now, The Mummy is more domestic, psychological, and infected than old-school adventure. Garbett is a very strong fit to make that feel intimate and sickly rather than grand and romantic. Lee Cronin's The Mummy's editor is Bryan Shaw, and like cinematographer David Garbett, he also worked on Evil Dead Rise. He was also the editor of Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead back in 2013. Now that is a big point in his favor because it means he is not just adjacent to this franchise space, he has already shaped two major modern Evil Dead films in the edit bay. That's good because editing is where horror tone often really locks in. It controls the dread, the shock, timing, escalation, and how long the audience is forced to sit in discomfort before release. Shaw's resume tells us he already knows how to cut this kind of material, whether the enemy is feral and bloody like Evil Dead or more emotionally structured like Evil Dead Rise. So for The Mummy, he looks like the stabilizing choice, someone who can keep Cronin's possession and infection approach sharp and controlled instead of messy. Stephen McKeon composed the score for The Mummy, and he also composed Evil Dead Rise. More importantly, he goes back further with Cronin because he also scored The Hole in the Ground. He is also Irish with a large body of film and TV work, and his own credit page includes The Hole in the Ground, Evil Dead Rise, The Cellar, and other dark material. Now, RogerEbert.com's review of The Hole in the Ground specifically singled out McKeon's score as one of the film's strongest and most unsettling elements. That may be the most revealing crew connection of all. McKeon is not just a returning collaborator from one successful film. He is one of Cronin's core creative partners across multiple horror projects. And because The Hole in the Ground was already built around parental fear, dread, and something wrong inside the family, McKeon's return to The Mummy tells us that the score again plays a major role in creating unease before the monster fully takes over. Lee Cronin is framing this film around possession and infection. McKeon is the kind of composer who can make that feel invasive and deeply wrong. Trust me, you'll feel it. And the makeup and prosthetics are one of the film's biggest creative strengths. Cronin makes transformation central to the body horror, building the appearance around multiple phases of necrosis and turning that physical decay into part of the film's horror identity. The makeup effects were created by Dutch artist Arjen, whose prior work include Wolfman, Pan's Labyrinth, Maleficent, Ghostbusters Afterlife, Rings, and much, much more. The process was intense. The actress playing Katie's possessed form spent between 5 and 8 hours a day in the chair, often arriving around 3 or 4 in the morning just to be ready to shoot. She spent most of the film in heavy prosthetics, and that physical burden became part of the role itself. Cronin also kept Katie's final look hidden from the rest of the cast, so when they first saw her in the scene where she is brought home, the reaction hit with real shock. Now, that tells you everything about how this film uses makeup. It's not decoration. It is one of the main ways the horror gets under your skin. Lee Cronin's The Mummy production designer is Nick Bassett, and you guessed it, he also served as production designer on Evil Dead Rise. Beyond that, he's worked on 3 seasons of Ash vs. Evil Dead, and his other credits include Sweet Tooth, Guns, Akimbo, and Avatar in an art direction capacity. Motion Picture Association coverage on Evil Dead Rise also notes that Bassett came into the film with prior Ash vs. Evil Dead experience. Like more recent horror film reviews that I have done, lean on heavy production design for giving the film the necessary dread and tone. And it may matter more in The Mummy than people think. In this horror version, the environment have to do more than look pretty or ancient. They have to feel contaminated, oppressive, and emotionally loaded. Bassett already helped build the trapped, decaying apartment nightmare of Evil Dead Rise, and his horror world experience in Ash vs. Evil Dead suggests he knows how to shape spaces that feel lived in, cursed, and unstable. So when you watch The Mummy, you'll see a strong internal continuity of style, controlled visual horror, precise editing, invasive scoring, and production design built around spaces that feel corrupted from within. For Cronin's film, this is exactly the kind of team you would want. This is a Blumhouse production, and Jason Blum is the founder and CEO of Blumhouse, which I would describe as the home for horror across film, television, and gaming. Over the years, I have seen Jason Blum's Blumhouse form this company, and after its merger with James Wan's Atomic Monster, it is positioned as a major horror brand rather than just a single production label. Blum's importance is this. He helped build one of the defining modern horror companies by backing films and franchises like Paranormal Activity, Insidious, The Purge, Halloween, Get Out, The Invisible Man, Megan, and Five Nights at Freddy's. That track record is why the name carries weight. He is associated with commercially successful horror that usually has a clear hook, disciplined scale, and a director-forward approach. Now, for The Mummy specifically, Jason Blum is one of the producers alongside James Wan. And that's a big deal because Cronin's version is not a throwback adventure, but a scary mummy movie built around body horror, possession, and emotional trauma. So once James Wan and Atomic Monster enter the picture, the producer side starts making a lot more sense as the director side. Wan launched Atomic Monster in 2014, and this company is tied to some of the biggest modern horror brands in the business, including the Conjuring universe, Annabelle, The Nun, Megan. So when Wan is attached to Lee Cronin's The Mummy, to me means that it's not being treated like a nostalgic monster redo. It is being shaped by people who know how to turn horror into a sustained modern franchise language. And to me, that matters even more now because Atomic Monster and Blumhouse officially completed their merger in January of 2024, while still keeping their own creative identities. So with Jason Blum, James Wan, and Lee Cronin all connected here, The Mummy starts looking like a project built at the intersection of 2 very specific horror strengths. Blumhouse's hook-driven, emotionally personal horror, and Wan's franchise-tested instinct for possession, supernatural dread, and audience-friendly terror. That is why this movie feels worth watching closely. So producer-wise, this is about as clear a statement as you can get. They are not reviving The Mummy as a throwback adventure. They are rebuilding it as a modern horror property with serious genre muscle behind it. Jack Reynor is a very deliberate choice for this film. He is not just recognizable lead, he already has real horror weight because of Midsommar, where he played Christian, the emotionally hollowed boyfriend trapped inside one of the most unsettling folk horror films of the last decade. If you've seen Midsommar, Ari Aster frames Christian and Danny as a couple already falling apart before grief and ritual horror consume the story, which is a useful reference point here because Cronin's The Mummy also appears to be built around a family unit under emotional strain. Now, what makes Reynor especially useful in genre work is that he can play weakness, avoidance, panic, and guilt without flattening into a simple villain. In Midsommar, that mattered because Christian is not the monster in a literal sense. He just becomes part of the film's emotional horror because he is passive, selfish, distant, and unable to meet the grief in front of him. Reynor's performance helps make the movie's dread feel personal before it ever becomes ritualistic or grotesque. That is a big reason his horror credibility is stronger than a simple "he was in a horror movie" label suggests. That background makes him a strong fit for this film. Laia Costa gives Lee Cronin's The Mummy emotional force and dramatic control. Her breakthrough roles in Victoria Nunes establish Costa's grounded and deeply felt screen presence, which she brings to a film centered on family fracture and emotional strain. Now, take into account Victoria. That film is not a horror film, but it is one of the best examples of sustained screen panic and emotional escalation in recent cinema. Costa had to carry that movie in real time, keeping the character credible as the night spirals out of control. While she is not primarily known as a horror actor, whose work is characterized by darker, more psychologically tense material, she has more recently stepped into fantasy television with The Wheel of Time. She does not play scenes from a safe distance. She pulls you into them. Now, in The Mummy, you'll see what kind of intensity matters, because the horror only works if the family at the center feels real first. Now, Costa brings that weight. She gives the film a strong dramatic anchor and helps make the emotional damage feel just as important as the supernatural threat. The Egyptian-Palestinian actress Calamawy has quietly built one of the more interesting careers of any actor working in genre right now. She broke out for a lot of viewers with Moon Knight, where she stole scenes from a literal Marvel superhero by grounding the mystical chaos in something human and prickly. That mix of emotional weight and "I will absolutely stab you if I have to" energy is exactly what makes her such a good fit for horror. She's also one of the relatively few Arab actresses getting substantial textured roles in studio projects, and you can feel the difference on screen. She doesn't play Egyptian flavoring. She plays a person with an actual inner life who happens to be Egyptian. In interviews and festival appearances, she comes off as sharp and very clear about what she will and won't take on, which might be why you don't see her attached to every random streaming thriller that needs a regional expert. There's no big scandal headline hanging over her yet. If anything, her controversy, such as it is, tends to be weird corners of the fandom arguing she should have been the lead in a couple of projects she's in. What's interesting is that her filmography runs a pretty wide range: TV, indie drama, big franchise IPs, but there's a through line of characters who are trying to impose rational order on something fundamentally irrational. That's a great gear to have if you're going to keep jumping between superhero cosmology and supernatural horror. If she keeps choosing roles at this level, I wouldn't be surprised if a few years from now we're talking about her in the same breath as some of the established genre anchors she's already sharing the screen with. Verónica Falcón brings a different kind of value to The Mummy. She is the kind of actor who gives the film instant gravity the moment she appears. She is not just a background support in the ensemble. Here she plays Katie's grandmother. Now, what makes Falcón such a strong fit is her screen presence. Her best-known work is in TV, Queen of the South, Ozark, and Perry Mason. And those credits all share something important. She tends to play characters with force, control, and emotional history. She does not come across as lightweight or ornamental. She brings authority, danger, and lived experience. That matters in a film like this because this is a grief-heavy, family-centered horror story, not a breezy adventure throwback. An actor like Falcón can make the emotional world feel older, heavier, and more consequential. She also has a direct recent horror connection through Imaginary. That is useful because it means she is not stepping cold into supernatural material. But the bigger point is not simply that she has done genre, or sci-fi, or horror. It is that she carries the kind of dramatic weight that helps this type of genre feel serious. In a story built around loss, return, and dread of a family confronting something impossible, Falcón is exactly the kind of actor you cast when you want every scene around her to feel more grounded and more dangerous. Natalie Grace is playing Katie, and she has the most important role in the entire film. Publicly, she is still an emerging young actress with credits including 1923, Reynor, and now Lee Cronin's The Mummy. Natalie Grace as Katie, I think, is the Linda Blair figure in this film. Not because The Mummy is copying The Exorcist, but because Katie seems to occupy the same structural role. She is the child whose condition transforms the family home into a site of dread. But where Linda Blair's Regan embodied demonic possession, Katie embodies something more hybrid, possession as infection, where the horror is not only spiritual but physical, spreading through the body into the family itself. That feels very Lee Cronin, because it blends emotional breakdown with body horror, rather than treating possession only as a religious event. Hawa Kamil is an Iraqi-British actress from East London who trained at the Identity School of Acting. She's best known for playing Miriam in Netflix's Vikings Valhalla, and her screen credits also include Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile. She also comes from a strong theater background with work that includes Othello, If Chloe Can, Our Days of Rage, and Baghdadi. Billie Roy is an American actress who plays the youngest sister, Maude Cannon. Her prior credits include Spirit Halloween, the movie, The Waterfront, or Origin, A Little Prayer, and See You When I See You, giving her a growing resume across horror, television, and drama. Shiloh Molina is an American actor who plays Sebastian Cannon, actually the middle child, but acts as the older brother. He is best known for Deadly Illusions, The After Party, and The Really Loud House, with additional credits including All Fun and Games, Rust, Stargirl, The Post, and Manhattan. Shiloh is an integral part of this family dynamic. Emily Mitchell is the young actress who plays the young Katie. Her other credits include Holly, The Front Room, Goosebumps, and Annabelle's Cabin. So where does Lee Cronin's The Mummy stand right now? Critically, it is mixed, with 45% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 46% on Metacritic, but the audience side is stronger, with a 76 popcorn meter on Rotten Tomatoes. Financially, the movie has grossed roughly $35 million worldwide, including $14.6 million domestically and another $20.9 million overseas. And once you factor in the reported $22 million production cost, the picture changes a little. This is not some huge runaway success, but it has already grossed well above its production budget, which makes it a much sturdier result than the mixed reviews might suggest at first glance. Lee Cronin's The Mummy is not a perfect film, but for me, it's a full-body experience. The kind of horror where the air, the sound, and the texture of the images do as much damage as the jump scares. Visually, I think it's really strong, the way Cronin frames the doorways, hallways, and that rotting section of the floor turns a fairly normal house into a second tomb. It's the slow, patient reveal of what's wrong with this girl, and the space that keeps the tension of humming instead of just relying on loud bangs. The sound design is fantastic and quietly vicious. You get the obvious things, the knock on the sarcophagus, the scraping in the walls, but it's the smaller details that kind of got under my skin. The specific wet crackle of Katie's breathing, the way teeth clicks and bandages peels telegraph what's coming long before we see it. The score does its job setting the mood. It never became the headline for me, but it supports the suffocating atmosphere nicely. It's exactly what is needed to be. This isn't a VFX reel, it's a texture movie. Crackled skin, bandages, flesh, scorpions, and beetles. Bodies hanging in ways that shouldn't. When the budget edges show, the film covers them with momentum and nastiness. Once we hit Grandma's wake and the third act ritual, You're too busy wincing and laughing nervously to worry about seams. So let's talk about the big complaints that are floating around. A lot of people are bumping on the 2-hour, 14-minute runtime and the way the movie keeps cutting back to the investigation. Some would happily chop out most of Dalia Zaki's work and just stay with the family. Others want the opposite. Some others want more family psychology, less procedural detours. I'm firmly on the side that thinks the length and the cross-cutting are part of the point. Cronin is trying to give you a full narrative, grief horror in New Mexico, and folk ritual mystery in Egypt, slowly knitting together. So, if you buy into that idea, Dalia isn't a distraction. She's the one character insisting that all this horror actually makes sense, that there is logic to why Katie was chosen, and how she is supposed to be treated. Now, as a parent, that matters. If my kid disappeared and then came back like this, I would absolutely want someone on the other side of the world digging into why. The investigation gives the family's nightmare shape, which is why I never got bored, even on a back-to-back double viewing. Then there's the parallel logic issue. A lot of other reviewers are tearing their hair out. Why would you bring this obviously cursed feral mummy child back into your house? Why aren't you calling every specialist on Earth by the 10-minute mark? On paper, they're right. Emotionally, I think the movie sells it. You have two parents marinating in guilt for 8 years. One was there when she was taken. The other missed the grooming. When that kid comes back, the fantasy that love and time will fix her is incredibly powerful, and people in that kind of guilt spiral absolutely do irrational things to try to repair the one mistake that defines their lives. Is it frustrating? Absolutely, yes. But for me, it's the same flavor of frustration you get from something like Ordinary People or Hereditary. You're watching people who are too damaged and too stubborn to make the clean, rational move. That's not a bug of the movie. That is the horror. On the "this isn't a traditional mummy movie" front, I'm not even sure we know what that means anymore. If mummy franchise film equals tomb raiding adventure with quips like and big CG sandstorms, this is absolutely not that. Cronin is much closer to a possession film or an Evil Dead cousin wrapped in Egyptian bandages instead of Catholic iconography. And that's the part I liked. The Nazarenian concept, a demon whose whole brand is destroying families, bound in a living host with scripture skin, is just the Exorcist template run through desert folklore instead of Vatican bureaucracy. We've been doing versions of this since the original Exorcist. Obscure deity, possessed kid, baffled parents, reluctant academics, bloody ritual solutions. The question is always, does this version feel alive? And for me it does. This has the mean-spirited slapstick of Evil Dead rise, the grief weight of Hereditary, and enough mummy DNA, sarcophagus wrappings, curse-keeping bloodlines to justify the title, even if it never becomes a swashbuckling franchise launcher. On the gore and bloody horror, if you love slimy, over-the-top, crackly, oozy horror that delivers toenails, teeth, skin, embalming fluid, that scorpion through the throat moment, Cronin knows exactly which buttons to push. I went in thinking that the marketing might have oversold the nastiness after 2 screenings. I can say the movie actually earns its reputation. Performance-wise, I think the cast really sells the emotional spine. The child actors feel like real kids, not just creepy kid cliches. Billy Roy as Maud is a perfect younger sister on the road to hell. Funny, sweet, and absolutely terrifying once the demon starts wearing her as a meat puppet. May Calamawy and Hawat Camille give you a very clear good versus burden villain dynamic without turning either one into a cartoon. And Katie herself is never the real antagonist. She reads as a victim from start to finish, even when she's doing something unforgivable. If you come in expecting a breezy, pulpy mummy adventure, yeah, this is going to feel like a bloated, grotesque tour. If you show up wanting a grief-forward possession story that just happens to use mummification as its central metaphor, I think the length, the structure, and even the bad decisions all make a lot more sense. Bottom line, I saw this film twice back-to-back and was never bored. I liked the family dynamic, I liked Zaki's investigation, I liked the mythology, and I thought the horror set pieces actually built on each other instead of just repeating the same scare. So if your horror diet leans toward gooey, mean, possession-adjacent stories with a strong emotional core, I think Lee Cronin's The Mummy is absolutely worth your time. For me, on the horror scale I use here on the channel, it's still a solid 5 out of 5. Now that you know where I land on it and get into the fun part, the full spoiler breakdown. From the canary and the pyramid under the house, to Grandma's insane funeral, to that locked cell in Egypt, and what it might mean or say in future sequels. If you made it this far, tell me in the comments, did this feel like the real kind of mummy movie you actually want more of? Or are you hoping the next one goes back to tomb raiding and curse to treasure? Either way, if you want more spoiler-heavy, grief-soaked, mummy vibe horror breakdowns, hit like, subscribe, and we'll crack open the next sarcophagus together. And if you want to support the channel, check out the merch shelf. And grab Run P before you head to the theater so you don't have to risk making your own cursed walk into the dark and missing the moment the tomb